Cool. Hello, everybody. Just before we start, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting here today. So I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So good afternoon, and welcome to the June FightMND Scientific Seminar. My name's Min, and I'm FightMND's Care Grants Manager. So we hold these scientific seminars monthly. And last month in May, we heard from Associate Professor Sabrina Paganoni, who provided us with an excellent overview of the Healy clinical trial platform for evaluating potential new MND therapies. If you're interested in this presentation and weren't able to join us, the recording is available for you to look at on the FightMND website. For today's talk, following today's talk, we are going to be leaving lots of time for discussion and questions. So if anyone would like to ask anything, please use the reaction button on the top of your screen. There's a raise hand button on the top of the screen, and our team will enable your microphone and camera and let you know to ask your question. Alternatively, if you're a little bit shy, there's also the chat function where you can use to type in your questions, and we'll monitor and read out the questions on your behalf. So the chat function is only enabled if you're using the app-based version of Teams, and it doesn't work on the web-based version. So if you're using the web-based version, you'll just have to raise your hand and we'll unmute you to get you to ask your question. So onto our presentation for today. We are joined by four reps actually, from Synchron, a company born out of a technology developed in Australia that's bringing brain-computer interface technology to clinical trials in an Australian MND population. So Dr. Omid Farouzan is the Vice President, Clinical and Medical Affairs at Synchron, and he's leading the preparation and execution of the company's clinical trials for implantable technologies. He's also joined by Adam Fry, Clinical Science Manager at Synchron. So Adam oversees the design of the clinical strategy at Synchron, including overseeing outcome measures that would demonstrate meaningful patient benefit. So Omid and Adam will be taking us through some of the research, development, and clinical strategies behind Synchron's current trials for BCI technology. So I will pass it over to, I think, Chris first, who will do the introduction for Synchron, and then Omid and Adam.
Wonderful. Min, thank you so much. And good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Chris with Synchron. Wherever this presentation may find you, whether live or if you're viewing it recorded, we're so glad that you're here. To some, brain-computer interface is a familiar term, but to others, you may have never heard of it before. Today is designed to be both informative and interactive, and leave you not only enthusiastic around the convergence of technology for people living with paralysis, but empowered to share your perspectives and insights. Please join me in welcoming my colleagues, Drs. Omid Farouzan, VP of Clinical and Medical Affairs, and Dr. Adam Fry, our Clinical Science Manager.
Hi, everyone. I'm Adam. I'm the Clinical Science Manager at Synchron. It's a real pleasure to be able to speak with you today. I'm just going to give a quick overview of what a BCI is. I know a lot of people are brand new to BCI. We're going to start there. We're going to have a little look at the landscape of BCI as it stands right now, touch on some future directions within clinical trials of BCI. So let's start firstly with what is a brain-computer interface. So an implantable brain-computer interface, or BCI, these are devices considered neuroprostheses. They interact with the brain, and in the cases of people with paralysis, their goal is to restore lost motor or sensory functions. Typically, these are placed using craniotomy in order to position electrodes or sensors on or in the brain. Craniotomy is a procedure where part of the skull, the scalp, and the dura, which is the covering of the brain, is removed to expose the brain and place electrodes. But there are different approaches which we'll touch on now. Let's start off with the academic setting. Some hugely impressive recent advances in BCI, really building over the past 20 years. We see improvements in computer cursor control, in robotic arm control, somatosensory stimulation, so that's restoring a sense of touch or sensation, and then speech decoding, which is the example given here. The one important thing to caveat this is these are typically single person or small sample studies with demonstrating optimized performance. In parallel to this, what we're starting to see is a real emergence in a really growing field of private implantable BCI companies. I don't think this is an exhaustive list. Here's some that don't include adaptive DBS and other techniques that people also consider to be BCI. We're going to go through these companies, which I think we can split into 3 different approaches based on their sensors, their recording electrodes. So approach 1 is penetrating cortical electrodes. So these involve electrodes that are placed into the brain itself, maybe threads like Neuralink, narrow pins like Paradromics. Both these companies have clinical trials underway, but no published results yet for us to be able to discuss. The second approach is surface ECOG or electrocorticography arrays, also placed by craniotomy, this time placed on top of instead of into the brain itself. Several companies with clinical trials ongoing. This is not an exhaustive list, but none have yet commenced a chronic placement of a full BCI system. This is typically temporary placement right now to collect brain signal, like in initial early stage research. These devices are thin films with electrodes embedded and flexible and sit on top of the brain. The third approach is endovascular ECOG. One company in this space, that's Synchron. That's of course where I'm from. So here's a figure illustrating our device. So in the top right there, you've got the stentrode. That's our recording array. This is in the form factor of a stent. Stents are commonly placed in events in people with stroke or hypertension, and our device is very similar in design, except we have recording electrodes embedded into that stent structure. And then the other major component is that transceiver. So this receives the signal from the stentrode, contains a battery to power it, and an antenna to send the signal outside of the body to do things like controlling digital devices. We've completed 2 clinical trials, and I'm going to speak about those in a second. First, though, let's look at that placement, that endovascular placement. So they're placed using catheters. Those are thin tubes. We get access to the brain via the blood vessels, so we don't have to open the skull in any way. Once there, the catheter is retracted, the device is deployed, it expands by itself into the wall of the blood vessel, so it doesn't stay in the bloodstream. It records the signal from there, sends it down a lead to the transceiver, and that signal is sent out of the body to perform digital functions. The 2 clinical trials done to date, early human feasibility studies focusing on safety. So the first one was done in Australia. That's where Synchron was founded. That's where we were born. The first study was a 4-patient study. Individuals with chronic severe bilateral upper limb paralysis, each of which followed motor neuron disease. Primary endpoint was safety. All endpoints were met. Here we saw no serious adverse events, no negative lifestyle changes, and the results here are published in JAMA for you to look up should you wish to. Our second completed study was done in the US. This had 6 participants with similar functional impairments, and this was due to either motor neuron disease or stroke. Primary endpoint is again safety. That is paramount. All endpoints were met. 12-month follow-up is complete. Extended follow-up is ongoing. So let's dive into our endpoints and safety a little more. Our primary endpoint was device-related serious adverse events resulting in death or permanently increased disability. These are pooled data from the 2 studies. So across 10 participants, no events of that nature. And our secondary endpoints were evidence of thrombosis, which is blood clots forming, or stenosis, which is a narrowing of the blood vessels. No events, and device migration, which is movement of the device relative to where we initially placed it, something we don't want to happen. And luckily, again, none of those events. Here's an overview of all our safety data. We do have 2 serious adverse events. Both of these were local to the chest pocket where the transceiver is placed with infection around the incision there. Overall, this shows no serious safety events related to the stentrode, which is the portion of the device implanted in the brain, none related to the brain itself, none related to the vasculature. And there were no unanticipated serious adverse events. The risk of infection at the wound incision is a known risk, and it does occur with people who have transceivers placed for DBS for spinal cord stimulation for pacemakers. What about efficacy? So our goal with efficacy is clinical translation. And to achieve clinical translation, we need regulatory approval. So the regulatory bodies say, yes, that is safe and effective, that is good to be used. And we need reimbursement. We need someone to pay for it in order for patients to get access. To do this, we need to move from engineering-oriented outcomes towards clinically oriented outcomes, measures of clinical benefit. I'm going to talk about that briefly. First, of course, let's start with what is clinical benefit. Well, it's defined as a positive, clinically meaningful effect on how a patient feels, functions, or survives. Folded all there, we can demonstrate benefit in any one of these areas. Similarly, clinical outcome assessments measure how a person feels, functions, or survives. And these can be reported by a healthcare provider, the patient themselves, or through performance of an activity or a task. I mentioned we need to transition from engineering metrics to clinical metrics. So let's first consider what do I mean by engineering metrics? Well, here's a commonly used metric used often in those academic studies that we spoke about at the start of the talk. Now, bitrate is essentially a quantification of the amount of information transferred by the BCI. Incredibly useful, incredibly important measure. It's absolutely right that we measure this. We just need to make sure we're not confusing this for how a patient functions. Bitrate is not one-to-one with patient function. Many usability factors beyond bitrate, such as reliability, task load, how tiring is this, how difficult is this, affect usability and function beyond for any given bitrate. And an argument that I agree with, that I hear a lot, is with the bitrate of X you can do this, and with the bitrate of Y you can do this, and that's correct. But what we need to remember is it's the this that's important. It's not the number. It's what does that number enable us to do. So, what do we want to do with a BCI? What is this? Well, the right place to start, of course, is with the voice of the patient community. So here's a quote that we hear a lot. We hear, "He'd laid there for 3 hours just staring. He can't get help. He can't do anything." This is a family member of someone with MND. We hear a very similar story from the clinicians who care for this patient community. This one says, at night, he has no way to let his wife know he needs help. Neither are sleeping well right now because of fear. Very similar. This person is a very capable eye tracker. It's worth mentioning. Just at night, the reliability of that access point is not as strong as they'd like it to be. Access is lost. And that seems to be a common limitation with a lot of users of assistive technology. So eye trackers rely on alignment with the eyes. Physical switches rely on alignment with the body. Voice assistants rely on proximity to the voice, hearing it clearly, not making mistakes that are very difficult to go back and correct. Amazing technologies that give a great deal of benefit, but I think it's well understood that there are limitations, both in the community and actually in the scientific literature itself. Here's a paper from 2024. This one identified an unmet clinical need of continuous digital functional independence. The devices, these assistive technologies available today, they're shown on this figure on the right here, which has caregiver assistance along the bottom, along the x-axis, and an autonomy or functional independence on the y-axis on the left there. They propose that assistive technologies available right now require quite a lot of caregiver assistance and really don't give as much autonomy to users as perhaps possible. So that top left space there, that low caregiver assistance, high autonomy, that's really the goal. And I think that's an opportunity for implanted BCIs to fill, to make a real impact. This might be best shown. Here's a participant from our Command study in the US. First of all, he's unlocking his device. We keep it locked because we don't want false positives. We don't want signals sent when he doesn't mean to. And then with that, he's able to send a caregiver notification. There it goes right there. So that's sending a notification to his caregiver that like, hey, I need help. Please come help. This person was using attempted movements of his hand, completely paralyzed in the upper limbs. No movement was is possible, as you just saw. The brain signal responsible for attempting that movement, even if none happens, that attempted movement still involves neural signals, and that's what the BCI is recording, and that's what we're using to send the notification. Now, this is a very, very simple output, maybe the most simple output from a BCI, but for a certain patient population, I think the clinical utility of this is really obvious. What else, though? What else can we do with BCI? Well, again, thinking about clinical benefit and demonstrating clinical benefit and thinking about functional independence as this unmet need. Well, we typically measure functional independence using activities of daily living. As a quick refresher, 2 types of activities of daily living, or ADLs. There's the basic ADLs, that's your bathing, dressing, feeding, toileting, that looking after yourself. And then there's the instrumental ADLs, which is communication, managing your finances, shopping, healthcare. These are the skills that enable you to function independently within society. What we've seen, though, now is in the 21st century, a lot of these IADLs are typically performed digitally. If we think about communication, how I communicate, often with our digital tools. Managing finances, I cannot remember the last time I went to a bank myself. Everything is done on my phone. Maybe that's just me, but I think it's common. Shopping, again, most of it is done online. Managing our healthcare now with telehealth, logging onto the health portals, messaging the doctors. So much of this is done digitally now. This really presents an opportunity for BCI. Indeed, we've demonstrated BCIs to enable these things. We have, again, our participants in Switch and Command doing healthcare tasks, doing environmental control, shopping, communication, information retrieval. It's early days for Synchron, and these are still just demonstrations at this point. But I think the pathway to real benefit is really clear through these demonstrations. The problem is the tools to measure this. These are not recent tools. This is the Lawton on the right here. It's the original and perhaps still most widely used IDL tool. It was published in 1969, which incidentally was the same year that the very first message was sent using the internet in a science lab somewhere. So of course this was not designed to measure activities the way we do them today, and it's not specific to this scale. This is all scales for IADLs really. So I mentioned we touched on future directions for clinical benefit in clinical trials. This is something that we're looking at Synchron. We're considering how future assessment might involve a combination of new scales. Here's an example there. Existing scales, such as the COPM, we like this one. It's very centered around the priorities of the participants themselves, and perhaps also face valid objective demonstrations, the simple demonstrations of what these technologies can do. Of course, I've spoken about benefit today. The benefit is always weighed against risk. Different devices will have different risk profiles, and therefore the benefit against that risk profile will be specific to the device. Next, I'll hand over to Amit, who's going to talk you through a little bit about our upcoming clinical trials that have recently started both in the US and in Australia. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Chris, for the intro, and thanks, Min-Yan, for opening this session. And thank you, everybody, for joining us this afternoon and giving us the time. Adam, thank you very much for the introduction on BCI and the setting the foundation. Just a note before I start, Adam did a humble introduction of himself. He has been working on this and similar technologies for years and years, and this has been his mission in life to bring this to patients. So it's just very valuable. I just wanted to mention that and recognize that on the call. If you go to the next slide. So I'm going to talk about, so Adam talked about the technology, what's been done in the field, and what we have done in the past. I want to do a little bit of look forward and talk about the Focus Australia trial that we have recently launched. So first thing first, Synchron is returning to Australia. We started in Australia. We have deep roots from our technology and early clinical experience in Australia, and care a lot about the community that helped us to get here. So we're coming back to Australia with the enhancements and the experience that Adam explained. The trial, who are the participants? So number one is, first and foremost, is this trial is for adults with bilateral upper limb paresis, ALS, or other etiologies. And we want candidates who are 21 or older with life expectancy of more than 12 months. And I mentioned bilateral upper limb paresis. We have in our screening process, we have a way to criteria to essentially screen for this with a neurologist who's at the hospital when you visit, at first to consent for the trial. But very high level, this is the type of bilateral upper limb motor impairment that comes with limited or no functional use of arms or hands. And obviously, big part of this is being able to learn and help us learn. So cognitively being able to participate in a study and having the motivation to be part of the study is very important for us. And of course, we have to mention the fact that the patients would have to be supported by a caregiver in a suitable home environment, because we're going to be running sessions at patient homes and working alongside patients on a weekly basis to learn about the system and how the system works and how we can unlock these features that Adam talked about for patients. Study timelines, the screening and going through all the eligibility criteria typically takes about a month. It could be faster. In Australia, specifically, recently, we had an implant. That screening was much faster than 30 days. It was within a few weeks. Then the implant session happens at the hospital, where you will be staying at the hospital for a night after implant. But the implant session happens at the hospital. Then you go back home. The home sessions, like I mentioned, 12-month post-implant is the active follow-up, and then extended safety follow-up up to 3 years after that. The sessions that I keep talking about, those will be roughly around 10 hours per week, spread out throughout the week. Obviously, depending on your availability, your capability, that could be adjusted, but on average, we want to make sure that we hold 10 hours minimum per week, or roughly around 10 hours per week. What we're going to measure in this study, first and foremost, safety. We have established a safety foundation with the 2 clinical trials we have completed so far. We want to keep building on that, and we want to make sure that device and procedure-related adverse events are followed up, are monitored and tracked. This will be with the follow-up CT scans that we have in the first year. It's at 3 months and at the end of the year. Beyond safety, we want to track ability to generate digital motor output for patients, or DMO, if you hear it, and also the independent control of digital devices over time. Of course, that capability has to be built in working with our team and working with the device, and as the system and the patient will be trained, but we want to track and make sure we get there. Those are very similar to what Adam showed for the patients from the previous trials, not that different, but like I said, we have to build the capability there. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that home training. I keep talking about building the capability to get there, and a bit about patient experience. So an important concept in Synchron BCI is that learning happens with the system and with the individuals using it. So each day you will complete guided activities like attempting specific movement. This will help building control. So you will intend to move your arm without having to move your arm, obviously, or move a limb. It could be upper limb or lower limb, by the way. And the system will sense that intention to move. And through interaction with the system, these tasks will help the system to learn the unique brain signals and the way you trigger these signals with the characteristics that, how fast you can do it or how long it takes to engage, and that based on the prompts you get. And this practice methodology, this process requires consistency, support, and patience with us. And this will train our system, and it will also train you using this system. Go to the next slide, please. So this is an example of training task. So in this schematic, in this example, your goal is to perform a certain action. So you're basically the audio cues on this screen moving to each of the regions. That arrow is gonna ask you to think about or intent to squeeze your left hand, for example, or that movement could be, doesn't have to be that, it's patient specific. There's like series of movements that we're gonna go through, but these actions may later, as you start to do these over and over and practice, and the system captures that signal coming from your intention to move, these actions may later then be used as clicks or button presses. And then that could be employed later for other activities. Go to the next slide, please. And there are different types of these training tasks. The first one that I mentioned, the last one that I showed, that was acting on a cue that you see on the screen. So you're following the screen, you're interacting with the screen in that way, just looking at the screen and thinking about a movement. It could be other training tasks, such as motion in different directions. So eventually these actions may be used to move a cursor or select a button from a grid. So there's different, we're going to build up on these capabilities over time. And this, if you ask about the time frame, that time frame could be, weeks, or it could be a few months that you start to build that capability and go through that practice. By the way, that very early on, you can see these controls. That's very early on, but we're going to try to build and refine that. And then ultimately, by having those capabilities built, we want to actually be able to achieve at first some basic activities, and then later on more complex one. But let's say the most basic one is sending a notification to a caregiver. So in this example, patient is thinking about that moving that limb that has been trained on based on those slides that I showed, and that intention to move, that specific, very specific motor intention, or engage in that very specific motor intention, is going to trigger the system to send the caregiver a notification. That's an example. Or if you go to the next slide, more advanced activity could be communication using, using the computer, using a synchron interface to send a text to the caregiver. So once the BCI has been trained to navigate on the screen, the action may be used with an on-screen keyboard to communicate and connect with other technologies. I want to make sure to mention here that one of the very important aspects for using our technology is privacy. So we're not looking into the context or content of the messages. For example, once you get to this point to send a caregiver, the system is going to be able to just track the intention that you have to move a limb, but we're not really reading your thought of communication. That's not what the system is detecting. The system is detecting intention to move and decoding it to a specific movement on a screen. And later on, this builds more and more on more advanced capabilities and more advanced activities that Adam showed some examples from the past trials. In this video, I want to show one of our current patients, how they, their experience and what they've done so far in this study.
Hi, my name is Mark Jackson. I received the Synchron Stentrode implant in August of 2023 and have been fortunate enough to be able to work with this BCI now for a while. I have been diagnosed with ALS since January of 2021. It was kind of a whirlwind. I was admitted into the program very quickly, and was thrilled to be involved in the groundbreaking, I guess, if you will, research and development of this, the BCI from Synchron. Really wanted to take the opportunity, and it gives me that opportunity to give back. I know, unfortunately, that ALS is one of those diseases that there's no cure for right now, but to be involved in helping others, making it easier down the road, not just for ALS patients, but for anyone who has a neurological disease that prevents them from being able to use their arms and takes away their independence. This, to me, was a great opportunity to work with a new technology that would give some of that independence back to the individual. And so I jumped on board. And the journey has been amazing. There's been a lot of firsts. There's been a lot of some disappointments. I think anytime you do research, you've got ups and downs, but the predominant force keeping it going forward is that there are positive results that have been able to help in the independence of individuals that can't use their arms. I knew that that's what I wanted to do, to use the time, whatever time I have left. I mean, it could be 6 months, it could be 6 years from now, I don't know. But whatever time I have left, I wanted to be able to use it to help further technology, to help further understanding of how a brainwave computer interface can make a difference in not just my life, but the lives of many, many, many others.
Yep. And finally, I want to mention thank you all for joining today. Thanks, FightMND, and the community for welcoming us back to Australia. We're very honored and very excited to be back. If you want to learn more about the trial or register to be part of the trial, go to synchronbci.com or scan the QR code you see on the screen. The picture on the left is the first patient, and I was there at the Big Freeze event just a few days before his implant. It was an exciting event, and just gives me chills thinking about it. Very happy to be back in Australia, and yeah, I asked the patient this morning if it's okay to use this picture, and yeah, just excited to be back. Let us know if you have any questions. Chris, back to you.
Omid and Adam, thank you both so very much. Min, again, thank you and the team from FightMND for the opportunity to be here. And I think Omid said it best. Thank you to the incredible people who have supported Synchron basically through their exploration with us in our past 2 clinical trials. Our company would be nothing if not the ability to connect and learn from the participants of our previous clinical studies, as well as the studies that we are embarking on now. So to Min's point, I'm usually used to Zoom. I haven't done Teams Q&A yet. Super excited to try this out. We would love your questions and feedback, and we're happy to take them now.
Right, thanks guys. So for those who weren't here earlier, so if you do want to ask a question and you're using the web app, you can just type your question into the chat. If not, feel free to raise your hand and I'll unmute you and you can introduce yourself and ask a question. So Bronwyn has a question around, do participants need to be fluent in speaking or reading English to be eligible for the trial?
Yes. I mean, Omid, feel free to jump in. But on this one, yes. Right now, we're still building the system, and unfortunately, that
requires fluency in English for participation.
Although I would recommend still joining the synchronbci.com community to learn more about the trial and the updates, coming soon, hopefully, about the system, essentially, removing this barrier at some point soon.
Yeah. Cool. In terms of the clinical trial sites, where are they based in at the moment? And are there any considerations for patients who are living in regional or rural remote areas of Australia?
I can take this one. Yeah. So currently, we have hospitals working with us in Melbourne. We have also Sydney getting started very soon within the next few weeks and looking into centers in Brisbane. Later in the year, we're going to expand to other regions. Although I want to say we don't want this to be a limiting factor. We will facilitate patient transfer to hospitals to get the implant. This does come with, limitations, logistic planning, and all of that. Like I said before, please do join synchronbci.com. Even if you're not in any of those regions, consider all Australia being part of, the trial, and we'll try our best to make it happen.
Thanks, Amy. I've got a couple of other questions while we wait for people to think about them. So the trial involves obviously people living with MND, but their day-to-day care is managed by their carers, their allied health team, etc. How are you engaging with the people around the patient and ensuring that, I guess, that they're engaged and that that the care of the patient isn't diminished because of the trial, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I can take this, and maybe Adam, if you want to chime in after. But the first thing that we want to make sure that, the first and foremost is the care of the patient. So that's absolutely the top priority for us. So we want to make sure this does not interrupt that. It's on the side of the care, ongoing care. Part of that screening is looking into what is the routine for the patient, what is the care. So the patient sessions I'm talking about, we'll schedule around all the care, the daily routines, the weekly routines, all of that. That's why we can, tune up to tune down, week to week. But part of that screening is to understand and see, how much patient time is available for us to consider for the trial. But I want to say priority is patient care. We do not want to disrupt that at all.
Yep.
I don't know, Adam, is there anything else you wanted to mention?
I think that's it. Any study that we perform works around the patient rather than the other way around. That's it in a nutshell.
Thank you. And I've just got one last question. So you talked about training sessions initially. How fatiguing are the training sessions for people with MND? Because I think you said like each session was about 30 to 50 minutes long. How fatiguing are they in general?
So the sessions would require engaging with the screen and engaging with a synchron person at home working with the patient. It's really hard to say, I don't know how to measure how fatiguing it is, but again, this is not a session that, let's start it and make sure, we power through, an hour straight or 2 hours straight. We're going to incorporate breaks. We're going to really, that's why, again, part of that screening, we're going to have like a demo type visit to understand, how patients can interact with computer. Are we, is our system mature enough to have a patient comfortably going through these sessions or not? And then, still, when a participant starts being part of the trial, we will work around patient tolerance. Again, not every day is the same. Not every week is the same. And even with that, it's just a lot of, it's very flexible. It's not a rigid protocol.
Yeah. So Caroline has a question around, is there a distance limit between notification device and the carer's phone for contact? I guess, is there a distance limit between like the patient and any other device that they need to access in order to notify the carer?
So it's a good question. So there may be a distance between the patient's implanted device and the system they're using, the computer that they're using. But once that message has been received by their own device, Essentially, it's just a digital control signal, which is extremely generalizable and can be mapped to many different formats, such as text messaging, which of course does not have a distance limit, if that makes sense.
Yep. So they need to be close to the device that they're working with, and that device can send the signal out to other devices
Anywhere.
around. Yep.
Exactly.
Yep. Dav? Or did you want to ask a question?
Am I still not coming off mute? Sorry, connections here are not that great either. Thanks, Ahmed, Chris, and Adam for the presentation. Just got a couple of technical questions that I'll go through if I may. In terms of capabilities of the BCI and the data that you're capturing, is it going to? I understand it will be used to refine what's happening for an individual. Will you also use that data from an individual to actually refine the whole system as a whole going forward as well to advance the whole system going forward, like the data that you're capturing to improve capabilities?
Yeah, I'll definitely jump in with that one if that's okay. We have a paper under review right now, which is going to talk a lot more about that. So look out for that one. But in a nutshell, absolutely. Let me give a specific example. So in our most recent study, it took a long time to develop kind of these capabilities, but what we managed to do is as we went through the study and collected more data, that was able to inform the kind of decoder models for the later participants. And by the end of the study, we had an out-of-the-box system that had a very simple single discrete click output, but right out of the box on the very first attempt at moving it with no participant-specific data whatsoever, they were able to achieve basic control of the BCI.
Right. Yeah, thanks. Could I ask one more, Min?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. One more. Just going back, Ahmed, with your demonstration or talking about the on-screen keyboard and control of the on-screen keyboard with finer movements and around that. Do you envisage advances on that capability where kind of thoughts on words can be translated to words on screen?
If you're asking about this device, right now, this generation, this trial, no. But in future, absolutely. That's the direction, the eventual future, that's absolutely the direction. I think all BCIs want to move on to unlocking more and more capabilities. But this device is specifically motor brain computer interface, which is detecting motor intent, not any other intention.
Okay. Thank you.
We've got a question from Samantha. Samantha, give me a second while I unmute
And I think you have
Thanks.
one in the chat too, Min, from Blair.
Oh, thanks. We'll go Samantha first and I'll ask Blair's question.
Hi. Just building on that question from Dav. So you mentioned when using the BCI for communication by sending a message,